join me in welcoming Robert Tercek. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you for that intro. Well, thanks. Good afternoon. My name is Rob, and I'm going to talk to you about how cinematic artificial intelligence is going to transform storytelling. And as you just heard, my vision is that it's going to help us transcend the limitations of traditional filmmaking process. To give you a sense of the magnitude of the change that I foresee, I want to go way back in time. I want to go back 25 years. I left my job as a senior vice president at Sony Pictures in charge of digital media to join an obscure startup company called Packet Video. It's the very first company in the world to stream video to mobile devices. And now you have to take some imagination to reconjure up what it was like back in 2000 with a mobile phone. Most of the phones we had were black and white. We didn't have color screens. So naturally, my colleagues in the TV industry thought I'd lost my mind. They're like, wow, you left the movie studio to go do what? Putting video on a mobile phone seemed preposterous at the time. But I knew something they didn't know. I knew about the semiconductors. I knew about the microprocessors that are inside the phone. And I knew that as those progressed and got more powerful and as the bandwidth improved, soon enough we'd all have a device that would be adequate for watching video. Well, lo and behold, fast forward to today, most people today, 95% according to this survey, watch TV with a smartphone in their hands. And many times they're actually watching the smartphone with the TV on as the second screen in the background. This is not a secret, it's well understood. Matt Damon made a joke about it on the Joe Rogan podcast just a couple weeks ago. He said people are watching TikTok on their phones while they're watching Netflix on TV. But the biggest beneficiary of streaming, of course, is YouTube. And folks in the TV industry tend to look down on YouTube as something less than television, as something less significant or meaningful than TV. I think they should look a little closer because Netflix has actually surpassed broadcast and cable TV in terms of audience reach and revenue. It is now the #1 streaming service of all, including Netflix and Disney+. YouTube's much bigger, on every device in every nation on the earth. And that includes on the smart TV in your living room. The secret to YouTube's success, of course, is that they tap the power of that smartphone. So billions of people have smartphones, and that means millions of people are uploading video to YouTube every day. Every afternoon, YouTube gets more video uploaded than all TV and motion picture companies in the world combined produce in an entire year. Now, the video that's uploaded to YouTube, well, it's cheap and fast. Sometimes it's very authentic, and sometimes it's really strange, like really, really weird. There is an entire channel devoted to unboxing Kinder chocolate eggs. There are thousands of channels that'll teach you how to do things like how to make an unboxing video. And every week, hundreds of millions of people watch other people play video games, including this artificial character, Code Miko. So the things that emerge from user behavior are kind of hard to predict and typically not things that TV programmers would think of. In the meantime, all that viewing of the new platforms has taken away audience from traditional media. So the last 25 years, we've also seen a massive consolidation. Independent studios and major studios have all combined and merged. And with that have come the budget cuts, layoffs, and the heavy reliance on formulaic franchise content. None of that has been particularly good for storytelling. I'm sharing all this with you because I wanted to give you a perspective of the change that I see coming. That was all about the last 25 years, the digitization of distribution. And we're still dealing with the impacts of that. We're still dealing with the aftershocks from that. So these kinds of transformations can take decades to play out. The next big change that's coming is the digitization of creation. And folks, this is going to be even weirder and even bigger than the distribution. Today, a lot of people who are professionals in the motion picture business look down on generative AI because they see a lot of defects. They take a look at it and they say, well, it doesn't fit my workflow and it's not reliable. I get that, but I think that creates a blind spot. I think that's the wrong thing to focus on. For instance, just a couple weeks ago on that same Joe Rogan podcast, Ben Affleck was there, and he had a lot to say about generative AI. He always has a lot of opinions on this subject, and he's very dismissive. He has two scenarios. One scenario, he says, oh, people think they're going to just click a button and generate a show. That'll never happen. And my answer to that is, never is a very long time. Think twice before you use that word. His other scenario is that it's going to somehow destroy the VFX business. And even this scenario, I'm a little bit doubtful that he's right about that, but he says that sort of thing all the time. Here's the problem. Those two scenarios overlook a vast range of other scenarios. So by reducing it to like flavor A and flavor B, he's missing it. He's actually creating his own blind spot. I think that's a mistake. What we're talking about is way more than just AI-generated video. Cinematic artificial intelligence spans every aspect of film production. starting with story development and script development, all the way through pre-production, visualization, and design, through every stage of the production process, including actor performance and dialogue, all the way through post-production and editing. So it's the entire process. Now, there are tools being developed in every single one of these areas, and many of them are in use today. You might not be using them, but just go across to the innovation zone here, and you'll see plenty of examples of what I'm talking about. That's why I think it's safe to say AI for cinematic storytelling is inevitable. And I know the guilds don't like it when I say this stuff. People in the guilds, they find that a very contestable statement. Fair enough, they're entitled to that, but I know something they don't know. Once again, I'm paying attention to the semiconductor roadmaps. And if you look out, the next generation of GPUs, the next 2 or 3 generations, will reduce compute costs by a factor of 40 to 60%. When you generate video, your cost falls in line with the cost of compute. So what we're seeing is that the cost of creating video is going to go asymptotically towards zero. Let me put that in perspective for people who are in the film business. Today, a 90-minute motion picture costs about $100 million. So roughly, that's about $1 million a minute to make a feature film. Of course, you could spend more. Sometimes you can spend less. But on average, it's about $1 million a minute. To do a major streaming series on a platform like Netflix costs about $20 million per episode. So that's about $300,000 a minute. Last year, my company, Neura Studios, broke the $1,000 per minute threshold to generate TV quality video, and that's all in. That's not just the video, that's the actors, the voices, and everything, sound. We expect that cost to drop to $300 a minute this year, and by next year, it will be under $100 a minute. Folks, that's 4 orders of magnitude decrease in cost in the span of a couple of years. And when you have economics like that, total transformation is right around the corner. The quality level continues to increase. Of course, there's defects. There's a lot of room for improvement, but there's hundreds of companies focused on making those improvements. And that's why I think it's safe to say in a couple of years, generative AI will be undetectable. It'll be indistinguishable from regular live-action film. And that posits what I think is the most interesting of all these scenarios, to me. The idea that a single person with a desktop computer and a cloud connection will be able to make an entire feature film with no camera, no cast, no crew, no props, no set, no sound stage, no hard equipment whatsoever. To understand that, you have to look beyond the blind spot. You have to look at what is it good at? What does it afford that traditional filmmaking doesn't make possible? And generative AI makes a lot possible. Rapid iteration at low cost. The idea that you never have a final cut. It's a fluid narrative you can constantly iterate on. Easy remixing, easy style blending, the ability to include audience input in your story, and of course, the ability to generate special effects that would cost millions of dollars otherwise. Okay, so we now understand the affordances. Now we need a framework to posit a scenario. Whenever you do any kind of forecasting, it's good to have a framework. And if we're talking about the future of media, well, then let's turn to the master of future forecasting and media theorist, Marshall McLuhan. Late in his life, he put forth a framework called the tetrad. And it said that every new medium doesn't have just one effect, it actually has 4. It's going to influence 4 different trends. These are observable trends today. It's going to transform them in different ways. And so it's going to enhance or accelerate some trends even as it reverses other trends. It's going to make something obsolete even as it retrieves something else from the past. And so when we put cinematic AI in there as a new medium, we can ask ourselves, what's it going to retrieve? What's it going to obsolete? Here's my theory for you today. Cinematic AI is going to make obsolete the linear filmmaking process of the 20th century. It's going to enhance fragmentation. That sounds bad. I'll tell you why it might be good. It's going to retrieve from the past the idea of remixing and creative reuse, which currently, right now, a lot of people are very doubtful. You heard it on the previous panel. And I think it's going to reverse that trend towards industry consolidation. Let's take them one at a time. Rendering obsolete the traditional filmmaking process. This is what an auto body plant looked like 100 years ago. A lot of men, a lot of heavy equipment. This is an auto body plant today, fully automated robots. They move so quickly that they're dangerous. There are no humans in that plant. This is what a film set looked like 100 years ago. A lot of people, a lot of equipment. This is what a film set looks like today. A lot of people, a lot of equipment, no robots. The motion picture filmmaking process is mired in an outdated model. A left-to-right assembly line manufacturing process that was conceived by Henry Ford more than 100 years ago. And one of the defects with that process is that most of the creative decisions are front-loaded in the very first stage of development or in pre-production, and then the project is locked, and then we throw the project over the fence to the next group to go produce the film, and then they finish the film, and then the photography, and then they throw it over the fence to post-production. And anyone who's been in post-production knows what it's like to be on the receiving end of all those decisions that have been locked, and you're scrambling to cobble together a film. Generative AI is going to obliterate this, because generative AI is not a linear process. It's a series of cycles, iterative cycles connected together. This is a big part of what my company's focus has been in our research and development, which is enabling this non-destructive workflow so that you can keep what's working and iterate on what you want to change. And that's going to really transform the business because your film is never really done. That means a story is going to turn into a process, not a final product. And it's going to confer tremendous power on people who are in post-production because they'll have the ability to iterate and change and swap out characters and storylines and so forth. You've already heard some other speakers talk about that today. Next, let's talk about the acceleration. What will AI accelerate in filmmaking? I think it's going to accelerate the process of fragmentation. I think TV quality video is going to become both hyper-local and hyper-global. Let me unpack that for you. Most television shows are produced for a national audience in a national language. Obviously, some of the streaming platforms do produce for international, but it's a relatively small percentage. Today in the United States, there are nearly 500 scripted shows, dramas and comedies, in production. I expect that figure to increase by a factor of at least 100, but probably more like 1,000 by 2030, based on the economics I just shared with you. But here's the thing. Not all of those shows are going to be made in America. Because anybody anywhere can use generative AI to make any show starring any kind of character of any race or gender. So that means a teenager in Mumbai or Lagos or someplace else, any place really, will be able to make a show that features people or characters that look like Americans, driving American cars, speaking an American vernacular. Doesn't necessarily have to be made here. Of course, those shows won't be limited to Southern California. You'll have hyper-localized stories about every neighborhood in the world. That also means, given the economics I just shared with you, a tsunami of scripted entertainment. An enormous tidal wave of content is coming our way. And as we just heard on the previous panel, attention's already the scarcest commodity, so that flood of content is going to give great benefit to the large attention markets, the social media markets that already dominate our attention. How can a storyteller survive? I think storytellers are going to take fragmentation and use it as an advantage in this environment. So fragmentation as an adaptive survival behavior will emerge. I think all scripted entertainment is going to become episodic, and it's going to be set in a persistent world. You already do that with franchise content, but that's going to be true of everything. The reason for that is simple. Once you have an audience and they like your story, you're going to keep telling them more and more stories. Now, we'll vary the cinematic styles. Generative AI makes that very easy to do. We may change up the genres within those stories' worlds as well. But the whole point here will be to segment the audience or to fragment the audience. We know this is going to happen because you've already seen it. There was an explosion in the publishing industry over the last 20 years in book publishing. And authors have done exactly this. They started to split their audience. So take the category of romance. It's one of the most durable categories. It's existed since there were books. It's been around for hundreds of years, and it continues to be one of the most popular book categories. In 2015, 50 Shades of Grey was published, the first in a series. And that story is kind of your classic romance story format, right? A young woman who's filled with self-doubt falls under the spell of a rich and powerful guy, and romance ensues. You all know the story. That same year, 2015, Sarah Maas published a book called A Court of Thorn and Roses. And in that story, a young woman who's filled with self-doubt falls under the spell of a rich and powerful man. Sounds familiar, except that the man has supernatural capabilities. He's an elf character or some sort of fae. So that's the category called romantasy, which is exploding right now in this category. The third book is the one I want to draw your attention to because this author flipped the script completely. This is a Filipina author named Rin Chupeco, and the series is called The Bone Witch. And in this story, you start with a character who's a young woman who's filled with doubt. Okay, we've heard that part before, but she discovers within herself profound capabilities, immense capabilities, and by harnessing and unlocking them, she systematically demolishes a system of oppression. So in this case, the powerful figure is the female figure. So they flip the story that way. And the second part that's also quite interesting in this perspective is the romance isn't necessarily male-female. This is an author who identifies as pansexual, and so the characters have all sorts of relationships with all sorts of other characters. The point here is simple. We're using fragmentation to find your tribe. Split the audience. Use the fragmentation of genre to connect with the group that really identifies with that story and super serve that segment. Of course, it's not limited to identity on the basis of gender or orientation. There are many ways to split or segment an audience, by identity, also by affinity, and I think the most interesting stories are going to emerge at the intersection of 2 or 3 of these different attributes. And on top of that, we'll split the audience even more by choosing some of the many different visual styles that AI makes possible. So incredible diversity of styles in AI, as we've all seen, where you can mash up different types of different styles, or even create and recreate things from the past, like these examples that look like something that Marc Chagall or Pablo Picasso would have done for the Ballet Russe, or these cool techno nuns who've turned their church into a synthesizer. The point is simple. We're going to use generative AI to split the audience, to fragment the audience. The reason I can say this with such confidence is that I know what's going to happen because it's already happened. This year, the big viral breakout from Roblox is a generative AI theme called Italian brain rot. If you hadn't heard about it, that's because it's not for you. They're splitting the audience by definition. It passed around the world so fast that it was able to get to full-on merchandising. I mean, food products and collectible items and even designer underwear. All of that happened before Hollywood even took notice of Italian brain rot. And then it merged with the other big meme last year, which is 6'7". I know we're all a certain age in this room, so you're probably going, what is 6'7" anyway? Here's the point about 6'7", it doesn't mean anything. It's literally just there to split the audience. You either get the joke or you don't. If you get the joke, guess what? You're in the audience. If you don't get the joke, tough luck, you're out. That's what I mean by fragmenting the audience. I think generative AI is also going to help revive something that currently is in a lot of doubt, which is the idea of remixing and creative reuse of elements. And when the Writers Guild was on strike in 2023, there were a lot of clever signs written by the writers in the Writers Guild, of course. And this was one of the signs that they had. ChatGPT is a plagiarism machine. I laughed when I saw it. I have a lot of friends in the Guild, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Hollywood is a plagiarism machine. I mean, it's in our DNA to cite and quote, and we call it homage or whatever, but come on. And I'm not just referring to situations like allegations where one studio lifts entire storylines and characters and recreates them as a new franchise. I'm not even referring to that. I'm talking about this list here. Every director on this list has been sued for copyright infringement. Every director here and many others that I couldn't fit into this list. More copyright infringement suits have been brought against film directors than all the AI companies. So I think generative AI is actually going to make remixing great again, and you can select any verb from that list and stick it in there. I know I'm pissing off half the people in the room. Don't kill the messenger. Hear me out. Hear me out. I think remixing, plagiarism, if you have to call it, I think it can be great. The reason this is necessary and the reason it's a part of filmmaking is that we rely heavily on genre to communicate what the story is about, right? You need to tell people before they buy a ticket or before they watch a show, what's the show about? That's what genre, that's the use of genre. And so the problem is when you over-rely on genre, it descends into cliche, and then we have the phase of homage where filmmakers look back to when the genre actually was functional and it worked, and we try to recreate that a little bit, then it devolves into parody, and finally pastiche. I'll put this in perspective. From 1945 to 1965, the most popular genre in film was the Western, the cowboy movie. In 1960, The Magnificent Seven was released. Many consider this to be one of the best Westerns ever made, but the story wasn't original. The story, the plot, was borrowed from The Seven Samurai by Japanese director Akira Kurosawa. 4 years later, in the 1960s, a bunch of Italian producers decided to make their own Westerns that they shot in Spain, the spaghetti Westerns. And Sergio Leone led this process, and the first film he made was A Fistful of Dollars. And that film started off a tradition of 600 other spaghetti Westerns that were made. And you know those films, they kind of distilled all the tropes of the Western down to like a new vernacular, you know, the tight shot on the eyes, the hand by the gun, the extreme violence, the lack of any kind of like dialogue. So they kind of distilled the essence down. But here's the interesting thing, that first film, Fistful of Dollars, was not an original story. It was borrowed from a film by Akira Kurosawa called Yojimbo. And of course, Yojimbo has been borrowed several times by other films. For instance, Bruce Willis' Last Man Standing. And so you have this process of borrowing and recycling and retelling the story in different ways. Star Wars, we heard about it earlier today. Star Wars borrows from everything, right? And most famously, Star Wars borrowed from Dune. And Frank Herbert and his advisors took a close look, and they found more than 100 points of substantial similarity between the narrative of Dune and the first story in the Star Wars epic. But they didn't file a lawsuit because they realized that actually both stories drew heavily from Joe Campbell's work on a monomyth and from Tolkien and other fantasy stories from the past. And of course, Star Wars also borrowed liberally from Flash Gordon and World War II fighter pilot films like 12 O'Clock High. But most importantly, the first episode of Star Wars, the first film of Star Wars, borrowed the plot from none other than Akira Kurosawa. It all goes back to one guy. This time it's the film Hidden Fortress. Okay, so is it homage or is it stealing? It depends, right? It's a blurry zone. This is part of what filmmaking is about. When we deplete a genre, when we rely too heavily on genre, it turns into parody, right? The reason Deadpool works is because Disney beat the hell out of the Marvel franchise until the point where it was actually a joke. Sometimes a franchise will do it to itself. I think, for instance, if you look at the most recent James Bond films, they kind of echo, it's like a mimetic echo of the old era when it was cool, right? When the Sean Connery era, the early days. So they look back at the 60-year span of that film series. But that created a great opening for Rowan Atkinson to make a parody called Johnny English. Some directors, like Mel Gibson, have made an entire career out of lampooning depleted categories, depleted genres. So we need the genre to market the film. We like the genre because audiences are attracted to it, but then we beat the hell out of the genre, we deplete it. And that is the point when we shift from parody to pastiche. Now, pastiche is a super interesting concept. It's a super postmodern idea. It's kind of a blank parody. It's a parody without the comedic element. It's a parody without satire. It's citing, but it's actually inciting. It's taking an old idea that's recognized by everybody and turning it into a new vernacular. So it's like recycling an old theme. And we've seen many examples of this. Films like Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid and Zelig took old film footage and integrated it with new film footage to evoke a period time from a bygone era. Films like The Artist and Mank, here the cinematographers and filmmakers worked very hard to recreate the techniques of the past in order to invoke a mood from a previous era. And when it's done well, pastiche can surpass the limitations of genre and the limitations of cliche, and it can retrieve that old story from the past and transform it into something even better. And I think that's what Dr. Strangelove and The Princess Bride managed to achieve. Both of them started as a satire, but they became lasting epics people refer to all the time. If we're gonna talk about pastiche, we've gotta talk about the master of it, Quentin Tarantino. Every single frame of his movies is packed full of references to other films. The reference density in a Tarantino film is intense. And he's very clear about what he's doing. It's not homage. It's stealing. I steal from every film ever made. If people don't like it, well, tough titty, don't go watch it then. Great artists steal, they don't do homage. Now, folks, I think generative AI is going to turbocharge this process because, if anything, Gen AI is a pop culture blender. It is trivially easy to take a character shot on an iPhone and change the background, change the outfit. You can even transform that person into a Navi character or even Super Mario. So I think what's going to happen with generative AI is that as artists develop proficiency with this, they're not going to spread this process out over decades. They're going to stack it up in a single film, and you'll have intense amounts of reference density to other films. Some of it will be a parody, some of it will be a joke, some of it might be an old cliche that they retrieve, some of it will be simply pastiche, a blank parody. All of it stacked up as coded reference to attract an audience and split them in the process of fragmentation. And the audience is going to respond because they're going to use Gen AI to remix the story themselves, change those characters. The characters themselves become a trope that can be recycled. So in my final seconds here, let me talk about how we're going to reverse industry consolidation. It's quite simple. Decentralized creation. AI, when the cost comes down enough, anybody with a broadband connection and a PC will be able to make a film, and they'll be able to collaborate across cultures. I think it's actually going to revive the film industry by decentralizing it. Any artist knows that storytelling and creating art is a process of making conscious decisions among known alternatives. Gen AI simply increases the number of alternatives. These are tools that we have to master in order to tell better stories. I think this is going to expand the artistic repertoire, or the artistic oeuvre, tremendously. I know I covered like 100 examples here, so for those who want to download the slides, please grab that QR code and send me some feedback. I'd be thrilled to hear from you. Thank you all very much.